You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone suddenly stops talking? That's been my life for the past 3 months. Every time I came downstairs for breakfast, Mom would quickly close her laptop. Dad would fold his newspaper and clear his throat. My cousin Melissa, who'd been staying with us since her divorce, would suddenly find her phone fascinating. I'm not stupid. I knew they were planning something big. The hushed conversations about 7 nights and all-inclusive weren't exactly subtle. Neither were the travel brochures I found stuffed behind the couch cushions when I was looking for the remote. Turks and Caicos. Nice choice, really. I'd always wanted to go there myself. Living back home at 23 wasn't exactly my dream scenario either. After the magazine I worked for folded, and I had to drop out of my master's program, I didn't have many options. Student loans don't pause for unemployment, and my savings account was laughable. So here I was, sleeping in my childhood bedroom with its faded purple walls and high school awards gathering dust on the shelves. Mom made it clear I was cramping their style. She'd sigh whenever I used the kitchen, like I was some uninvited guest overstaying my welcome. Dad would make comments about young people these days not being able to stand on their own feet. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were saying this while planning a vacation that probably cost more than I made in 6 months at my old job. Melissa was the worst of all. She'd strut around in her yoga pants and crop tops, talking loudly on the phone about her exciting new life as a single mom. She loved reminding everyone that she was figuring things out and finding herself, as if my temporary setback was somehow a character flaw. The way she looked at me, you'd think failure was contagious. But I noticed things, like how Dad started checking his email more often, and how Mom began doing extra loads of laundry. Melissa bought new sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat that she definitely didn't need for Connecticut weather. She also started talking about needing someone to watch little Leah, her 18-month-old daughter, though she was vague about when and why. The pieces came together slowly. A week ago, I overheard Dad on the phone with his travel agent. 6 adults, 1 infant, he said, and my stomach dropped. 6 adults. Mom, Dad, Melissa, and probably Uncle Tom, Aunt Sarah, and their son Jake. I wasn't even a consideration. I was furniture they were leaving behind. I should have confronted them. Should have asked why I wasn't invited to what was clearly a family vacation. But honestly, I already knew the answer. I was the family disappointment. The cautionary tale they'd probably discuss over piña coladas on the beach. Poor Emma, they'd say, shaking their heads. Still can't get her life together. So I said nothing. I watched them make their plans around me like I was invisible. I saw Mom order swimsuits online and Dad research excursions. I noticed Melissa practicing her selfie poses in the mirror, probably preparing for her triumphant comeback tour on social media. The night before their departure, I lay in bed listening to them pack. Suitcases being dragged down the hallway, the sound of zippers, muffled conversations about flight times and departure gates. Nobody came to say goodbye. Nobody even acknowledged that I knew what was happening. I stared at the ceiling, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. The same one I'd had during high school when I wasn't invited to parties, or in college when my roommates made plans without me. I was always the afterthought, the person who found out about things secondhand. But this time felt different. This wasn't just exclusion from some random event. This was my own family leaving me behind like I didn't matter at all. And maybe that's when something inside me started to shift. Maybe that's when I stopped caring about their approval and started paying attention to what came next. The next morning, Mom knocked on my door at 6:30. "Emma, we need you to drive us to the airport," she said through the wood, not even bothering to come in. "Our Uber canceled last minute." Of course it did. I was their backup plan for everything else. Why not transportation too? I threw on jeans and a sweatshirt, not bothering with makeup or even brushing my hair properly. If they wanted a chauffeur, they'd get one that looked the part. When I came downstairs, they were all gathered in the living room with their matching luggage set, looking like a vacation catalog photo. Dad wore his traveling outfit, khakis and a polo shirt. Mom had on her new sundress with the tags still dangling from the sleeve. Melissa looked Instagram ready in white linen pants and a flowy top, her blonde hair perfectly curled. "Thanks, Em," Dad said, not looking up from his phone where he was probably checking flight status for the 100th time. "We really appreciate this." The drive to Bradley International was quiet, except for Melissa cooing at baby Leah in her car seat. I caught glimpses of them in the rearview mirror. Mom applying lip gloss, Dad organizing their boarding passes, everyone buzzing with excitement. The kind of excitement that comes with escaping your regular life for something better. I pulled up to the departure curb and popped the trunk. They moved efficiently, grabbing their bags and checking pockets for passports. It was choreographed, like they'd rehearsed this moment. I stood by the driver's side door, keys in my hand, waiting for them to say goodbye and leave so I could go home and pretend this wasn't happening. But then Melissa walked over to my car door, Leah in her arms. "Actually, Em, I need you to take her," she said, holding out the baby like she was handing me a package. I blinked. "What?" "Just for a second while I get my carry-on sorted." But instead of waiting for me to agree, she placed Leah directly into my arms. The baby looked up at me with those big brown eyes, completely trusting, completely unaware that her world was about to change. "Melissa, I don't understand," I said. But she was already walking away, pulling her small suitcase from the trunk. That's when Dad came over, his expression casual, like what was happening was perfectly normal. "Look, Emma, we couldn't get another ticket on such short notice," he said, adjusting his baseball cap. "And honestly, we weren't sure you'd even want to come." The words hit me like cold water. "You weren't sure I'd want to come to a family vacation?" Mom appeared beside Dad, her face showing the first hint of discomfort. "It's just that you've been so stressed lately. We thought you might prefer some quiet time at home." "Stressed?" I repeated, feeling the baby's weight in my arms, her tiny hand grabbing at my sweatshirt. "Plus," Melissa called out from behind her sunglasses, "someone needs to watch Leah. The resort isn't really baby-friendly for some of the activities we planned." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like babysitting her child was some kind of privilege. I looked down at Leah, then back at the three of them standing there with their vacation clothes and their excited faces. "So you're leaving me here to babysit while you go to the Caribbean?" "It's just a week," Dad said, checking his watch. "And you love kids." "I've never said I love kids." "Well, you're good with them," Mom added quickly. "Remember when you helped with the church nursery that one time? That one time, when I was 16, and I'd only done it because they made me." "Where are her things?" I asked, looking around for a diaper bag or car seat or anything that suggested they'd planned this. Melissa waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, everything's at the house. You know where stuff is?" She leaned down and kissed Leah's forehead. "Mommy will be back soon, baby girl. Be good for Tia Emma." Tia Emma, Aunt Emma. Like this was some sweet family arrangement instead of them dumping a baby on me without warning. "We really need to go," Dad said, glancing toward the terminal. "Security lines are probably crazy." And that was it. They each gave Leah a quick kiss. Mom squeezed my shoulder like she was comforting me instead of abandoning me. And they walked away. Just like that. 30 seconds, and my life completely changed. I stood there holding an 18-month-old baby, watching my family disappear into the airport with their rolling suitcases and their vacation dreams. Leah started to fuss, probably sensing that something was wrong, probably wondering where her mom went. "It's okay," I whispered to her, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to her or myself. "We'll figure this out." But as I strapped her into the car seat that I now realized had been in my back seat the whole time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not just anger or hurt, though those were definitely there. I felt clear. For the first time in months, I saw exactly who my family was and exactly where I stood with them. And somehow, that clarity felt like power. I was halfway through the parking garage when my phone started buzzing. Text after text after text. The first one was from Mom. "Flight delayed. Waiting for updates." Then Dad. "Mechanical issues. Might be a few hours." Then Melissa. "This is ridiculous. I have a facial scheduled for tonight." I stopped walking and pulled Leah's car seat up onto my hip, reading the messages as they came in. Each one sounded more panicked than the last. "Mom, they're saying it might be weather-related." Dad, asking about other flights. Melissa, "Can you believe this is happening to us?" To us. Like I was part of their vacation plans instead of the person they'd just handed a baby and walked away from. I strapped Leah into her car seat and sat in the driver's seat for a minute, watching my phone light up with updates. The baby was being remarkably good, probably still processing the fact that her mom had disappeared. I turned around to look at her and she gave me this little smile that made my heart do something weird. "Well, kid," I said. "Looks like Mommy's having some travel troubles." My phone rang. "Mom." "Emma, honey, there's been a complication," she started, and I could hear the stress in her voice. "The flight's been canceled, weather system moving in from the south. They can't get us out until tomorrow at the earliest." I sat in the parking garage listening to my mother explain how their perfect vacation was falling apart, and I felt the strangest thing. Relief. "That's too bad," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "The thing is," Mom continued, "we're going to have to come home tonight. The hotel here is booked, and we can't get another flight out until Thursday now." Thursday, 3 days later than planned. "We're going to need you to pick us up," Dad's voice came through the phone. Mom had put me on speaker. "Sure," I said. "What time?" But even as I said it, I was thinking about something else entirely. I was thinking about how they'd looked walking away from me. How easily they'd handed me a baby and walked off to their dream vacation. How they'd planned this whole thing without including me, then made me their backup babysitter without even asking. "Emma?" Mom's voice sounded tinny through the phone. "Are you there?" "Yeah, I'm here. Can you bring Leah too? Melissa's really upset about leaving her." I looked back at the baby, who was now playing with her fingers and making soft babbling sounds. "Of course," I said. When I hung up, I sat in the car for a long time. The parking garage was quiet except for the occasional car driving by and the sound of Leah experimenting with different vowel sounds. I thought about driving home and waiting for them to call when they needed another ride. I thought about spending the next few days taking care of a baby I'd never asked to watch while they sulked about their ruined vacation. But then I thought about something else. I thought about how Melissa had called me criada under her breath when she handed me Leah. Servant. I thought about how Dad had said I wasn't invited, like it was obvious, like it was natural. I thought about Mom asking if I'd prefer quiet time at home while they went to paradise. I started the car and drove home, but something had shifted. Maybe it was holding Leah and realizing that someone needed me, even if it wasn't by choice. Maybe it was seeing how quickly their perfect plans could fall apart. Or maybe it was just that moment of clarity in the parking garage when I realized I didn't have to be grateful for their scraps anymore. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to be their backup plan anymore. I wasn't going to be the person they called when things went wrong after excluding me when things went right. I carried Leah inside and set up the portable crib that I found in the hall closet. Everything I needed was there. Bottles, formula, diapers, clothes. They'd planned this part perfectly. They just hadn't planned on their vacation falling apart. When they called later that evening asking for a ride home from the airport, I was feeding Leah in the kitchen. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "Of course," I told them. "I'll be right there." But this time I wasn't doing it because I was their designated driver. I was doing it because I wanted to see their faces when they walked out of that airport. I wanted to see them realize that their perfect family vacation had turned into exactly what they'd tried to escape. Life with me in it. The ride back from the airport was like being trapped in a car with 3 disappointed children. Melissa sat in the back next to Leah's car seat, her perfect vacation outfit now wrinkled from sitting in uncomfortable airport chairs for 6 hours. She kept sighing dramatically and scrolling through her phone, probably deleting all the beach photos she'd planned to post. "I can't believe this happened," she said for the 5th time. "Do you know how long I've been planning this trip? I bought new bikinis. I got a spray tan yesterday." Dad was riding shotgun, his jaw clenched, staring out the window like the Connecticut highway had personally wronged him. $4,200, he muttered. "Down the drain." Mom sat behind him trying to play peacekeeper. "Well, we can reschedule for next month maybe, or try for Christmas break." "Christmas break?" Melissa's voice pitched higher. "Emma, did you hear that? Christmas break. Do you know what I'll look like in a bathing suit in December? I've been doing juice cleanses for 3 weeks. I kept my eyes on the road and my mouth shut. Let them have their pity party. I had other things to think about, like the fact that Leah had fallen asleep in her car seat and looked completely peaceful despite the chaos around her. Like how I'd managed to feed her and change her diaper without any help from her actual mother. Like how good it felt to be needed by someone, even if that someone was 18 months old and had no choice in the matter. When we got home, the real show started. Melissa immediately began calling the airline, demanding compensation, upgrades, anything they'd give her. She paced around the living room in her linen pants, her voice getting shriller with each transfer to a new customer service representative. "This is unacceptable," she said into the phone. "Do you understand that I have a small child? Do you understand that we had reservations?" Dad planted himself in his recliner with his laptop, probably trying to book a different trip, or at least find someone to blame. Mom disappeared into the kitchen to make what she called crisis coffee. Basically regular coffee, but with a lot more sugar and a shot of Bailey's. Meanwhile, I took Leah upstairs to change her diaper and get her ready for bed. It was already past 8, way past what I guessed was her normal bedtime. She was starting to get fussy, making those little whimpering sounds that meant she was tired but fighting it. "Come on, sweetheart," I said, lifting her out of the car seat. "Let's get you comfortable." I'd never changed a baby's diaper before, but it wasn't rocket science. Leah lay on the bed looking up at me with those big eyes, and I found myself talking to her like she could understand every word. "Your mom's having a rough day," I told her, fastening the clean diaper. "But between you and me, I think everything's working out exactly like it's supposed to." She grabbed my finger with her tiny hand and squeezed, and something inside my chest loosened. When was the last time someone had reached for me like that? When was the last time someone had needed me and actually shown it? From downstairs, I could hear Melissa getting louder on the phone. "What do you mean there's nothing you can do? I want to speak to your manager. I want to speak to your manager's manager." I picked up Leah and carried her to the window. Outside it was getting dark, and the streetlights were coming on. Normal people in normal houses were probably having normal evenings. Dinner, TV, bedtime routines that didn't involve screaming at airline representatives. "You know what?" I said to Leah. "Maybe this is better. Maybe staying home isn't the worst thing that could happen." She yawned, a tiny little yawn that made me smile. I found myself rocking her gently back and forth, and she started to relax against my shoulder. "Emma," Melissa's voice called from downstairs. "Where did you put her bottles? I need to make formula." But Leah was almost asleep, her breathing getting deeper and more regular. I didn't want to disturb her by going downstairs into all that chaos. "She's fine up here," I called back. "Already fed and ready for bed." "Well, bring her down here. I want to say goodnight." I looked down at the baby in my arms, finally peaceful after a day of being passed around and dragged to airports. "Actually," I called back, "I think she's better off staying put." And for the first time all day, I didn't ask permission. I just made the decision and stuck with it. The next morning I woke up to silence. Not the usual sounds of Mom making coffee downstairs or Dad watching the morning news. Just quiet. I checked my phone. 7:30 a.m. Leah's portable crib was set up next to my bed and she was still sleeping, her little chest rising and falling steadily. I slipped downstairs to make coffee and found a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to reschedule everything. Back this afternoon. Thanks for watching, Leah. M." Thanks for watching, Leah. Like I'd volunteered. Like this was some favor I'd offered instead of a responsibility they'd dumped on me without asking. But as I stood there in the quiet kitchen making coffee for 1 instead of 4, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had been burning in my chest since yesterday had cooled into something else. Something calmer but harder. Leah woke up around 8 and I brought her downstairs for breakfast. I'd Googled feeding 18-month-old baby the night before and learned about things like finger foods and sippy cups and how much milk she should be drinking. Melissa had left basic supplies but no instructions, no schedule, no guidance at all. "Guess it's just you and me, kid," I said, putting some Cheerios on her high chair tray. She grabbed a handful and shoved them in her mouth, then looked at me like she'd accomplished something amazing. I found myself laughing. Actually laughing. When was the last time I'd done that? The day passed easier than I'd expected. Leah was a good baby, curious and happy, content to play with kitchen spoons and empty boxes. I took her for a walk around the neighborhood in the stroller I found in the garage. People smiled at us. Mrs. Henderson from next door stopped to coo over Leah and tell me what a natural I was with babies. "Is she yours?" she asked, and for a second, I hesitated. "I'm babysitting," I said finally. "My cousin's daughter." "Well, you're wonderful with her. She clearly adores you." I looked down at Leah, who was trying to eat her own foot, and felt that chest-loosening feeling again. Adoration. When was the last time someone had looked at me like that? That afternoon, while Leah napped, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my laptop and started writing. Not job applications or cover letters, but actual writing. The kind I used to do before everything fell apart. I wrote about feeling invisible in your own family, about being the person everyone forgot to include, about finding yourself responsible for someone smaller and more vulnerable than you, and realizing you're stronger than you thought. The words came easily, like they'd been waiting for me to pay attention to them again. When the family came home around dinner time, they looked defeated. Melissa's hair was flat, her makeup smudged. Dad's shirt was wrinkled. Mom carried shopping bags from Target. Emergency supplies, probably. Any luck? I asked, though I could tell from their faces what the answer was. Earliest we can get out is next Tuesday, Dad said, sinking into his chair. Different airline, different destination, Barbados instead of Turks and Caicos. And it's going to cost us another $800, Melissa added, dropping onto the couch like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. I was feeding Leah dinner, mashed bananas and some kind of baby pasta I'd found in the cabinet. She was making a mess, getting more food on her face than in her mouth, but she was happy. Every few bites she'd look at me and clap her hands like eating was the most exciting thing in the world. How was she today? Melissa asked, though she didn't get up from the couch to come check on her daughter. Perfect, I said. We went for a walk, played in the backyard, read some books. Books? Melissa looked surprised. She doesn't usually sit still for books. But Leah had sat still for books. She'd pointed at pictures and babbled along when I read to her. She'd fallen asleep in my lap during the third story, completely relaxed and trusting. Maybe she just needed someone to pay attention to her, I said. The words hung in the air for a moment. Melissa's face tightened, like she wanted to say something back, but couldn't figure out what. That night after they'd all gone to bed, I sat in the living room with my laptop writing some more. Leah was asleep upstairs. She'd cried when Melissa tried to put her to bed, reaching for me instead. Melissa had looked hurt, then frustrated, then finally just tired. You do it, she'd said. She clearly prefers you anyway. And she had. Leah had settled immediately when I held her, had fallen asleep to my voice reading Goodnight Moon for the fourth time that day. As I wrote, I realized something important. For the first time in months, I felt useful. Not just useful, needed. Not in the desperate, last resort way they'd needed me to drive them to the airport, but genuinely needed by someone who didn't care that I was unemployed or living at home or that I'd failed to meet everyone's expectations. I was good at this. Taking care of someone, being responsible for someone, being the person someone reached for when they needed comfort. Maybe I'd been looking at my life all wrong. Maybe the thing I thought was my biggest failure was actually preparing me for something I didn't even know I wanted. Tuesday morning came faster than I expected. I woke up to the sound of suitcases being dragged down the hallway again. The same sound that had kept me up a week ago. But this time I wasn't lying in bed feeling sorry for myself. I was getting up to make Leah breakfast and help her say goodbye to her mom. The atmosphere in the house was different this time. Less excitement, more determination. They were going on this vacation whether the universe wanted them to or not. Dad had his phone out, checking flight status obsessively. Mom was making lists and double-checking everything. Melissa was applying makeup like she was going into battle. The car service will be here at 10, Dad announced, looking at his watch. Flight's at 1:15. We should have plenty of time. I was sitting at the kitchen table with Leah, helping her eat scrambled eggs. She'd gotten better at using her spoon over the past few days, though she still preferred using her fingers for most things. She looked up at me and grinned. Egg stuck to her cheek. Are you sure you're okay doing this again? Mom asked, setting a cup of coffee in front of me. I know it's a lot to ask. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in days. She looked tired, stressed, like the vacation couldn't come fast enough. It's fine, I said, wiping egg off Leah's face. We'll be fine. And I meant it. The past week had taught me something about myself that I hadn't known before. I was good in a crisis. I was good when people needed me. I was good at taking care of things even when, especially when, nobody thought to ask if I wanted to. Melissa came into the kitchen wearing a sundress and sandals, her hair in beach waves, her suitcase trailing behind her. She looked like the vacation photos she'd been planning to post, except for the uncertainty in her eyes when she looked at Leah. "Mommy's going on a trip, baby girl," she said, kneeling down beside the high chair. "You're going to stay with Tia Emma, okay?" Leah looked at her mom, then at me, then back at her mom. She didn't cry or reach for Melissa. She just went back to eating her eggs. "She'll be fine," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was reassuring Melissa or myself. "I left money for groceries and anything else you need," Melissa said, pulling an envelope from her purse. "And I wrote down the pediatrician's number, though I doubt you'll need it. Oh, and there's a playgroup at the community center on Thursdays if you want to get out of the house." I took the envelope, surprised by how much thought she'd put into this. "Thanks. I mean it, Emma. Thank you. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you moved back home." I looked at her. This cousin who'd spent the past year making me feel like a failure, who'd called me a servant and left me at the airport with her baby. She looked different now. Smaller, somehow. More human. "None of us signed up for how things turned out," I said. "But we're managing." The car service arrived exactly at 10. I helped them load their luggage, Leah balanced on my hip, watching the activity with interest. When it was time for them to actually leave, the goodbye was quick. Kisses for Leah, promises to call, reminders about emergency contacts. "Have fun," I said as they climbed into the car. And for the first time, I actually meant it. I stood in the driveway, holding Leah, watching the car disappear around the corner. The house behind us was quiet again, but it felt different than it had a week ago. It felt like mine. "Well, kiddo," I said to Leah, "looks like it's just us again." She clapped her hands and said something that might have been Emma, or might have been Mama, or might have been nothing at all. But whatever it was, it sounded like approval. That afternoon, I did something I'd been thinking about all week. I called my old professor, Dr. Martinez, the one who'd encouraged me to apply for graduate school in the first place. When I'd had to withdraw, I'd been too embarrassed to explain why, too ashamed to ask for help. "Emma," she said when she picked up, "I was just thinking about you. How are you doing?" "Better than I was," I said, watching Leah play with blocks in the living room. "Actually, I was wondering if you knew of any writing opportunities. Freelance work, maybe? Something I could do from home." "Funny you should ask. I just got an email about a family magazine looking for contributors. Personal essays about modern family life. It's not huge money, but it's steady work. Personal essays about modern family life." I looked at Leah, who had managed to stack 3 blocks before knocking them down and laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. "That sounds perfect," I said. After we hung up, I sat on the floor with Leah, building block towers and letting her knock them down. Each time the blocks fell, she'd look at me with pure joy, like we'd accomplished something amazing together. And maybe we had. Maybe learning to take care of someone else was exactly what I'd needed to learn how to take care of myself. Maybe being left behind was actually the first step toward moving forward. Maybe sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is the thing you never saw coming.